Hi, welcome back. My name is Jeremiah Peck, and this is part 2 of the section on human growth and development in our study of the National Counselor Exam, or NCE. In the last video, part 1, which if you have not seen, I would encourage you to take a look at, we discussed 5 different theories surrounding human growth and development. The first was behaviorism, and we looked at 4 different theorists that are very helpful for you to know with regards to answering some questions related to the NCE. Then we looked at Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development also. You may see some questions on the NCE related to these specific stages. For instance, case study type questions where you're asked if a client is a certain age, what stage of psychosocial development might they be in? So you'd reference one of those 8 stages that we discussed in the previous video. We discussed Lawrence Kohlberg's 3 stages of moral development as well. You could see some questions regarding if someone is examining a problem and they choose to take a certain outcome, or they choose to take a certain course of action rather, what stage of moral development is best represented by their choice? That might be a type of question that you get. You could also get a question about the names of these individuals. So knowing that Kohlberg is related to moral development, at least in his studies with men, we noted in the last video that Carol Gilligan was noted for examining moral development for women because Kohlberg exclusively studied men. We looked at Piaget and Vygotsky with regards to cognitive development in the last video, and if you didn't take a look at that, and again, I'd encourage you to do so. Some of what might be really helpful there, again, is refreshing not just on the stages, but on the overall ideas regarding accommodation and assimilation as well. Today we're going to be looking at Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic, psychosexual stages. We're going to be looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You could see questions about that. And then finally, James Fowler's faith and spiritual development as well. Potentially you could see a lot of questions regarding Sigmund Freud. It might be really helpful to note this, as you could see the word psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, or psychosexual as related to Freud. The developmental stages, just to distinguish between these things, so the developmental stages that Freud discusses are the psychosexual stages, which goes into his overall psychoanalytic theory. So Freud's specific theoretical orientation was psychoanalytic, and then currently, contemporarily, psychoanalytic is one of the psychodynamic models of conceptualizing counseling and psychology. So you have psychodynamic as the umbrella. Within the umbrella is Freud's psychoanalytic, and within his psychoanalytic are his 5 stages of psychosexual stages. And those stages are the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital stages. Oral being from birth to about 1, anal being from about 1 to 3, phallic being from 3 to 7, latency from 7 to 12, and then genital from adolescence on. 2 important concepts to hear regarding Freud's psychosexual stages is this concept of regression and fixation. Regression, when that's used in this theory, is this idea of an individual as they're chronologically developing, that they actually, instead of progressing, that they can go backwards. Freud suggested that this could be due to trauma, this could be due to difficulties, psychological difficulties, that an individual would actually regress or fall backwards to a previous level of psychosexual development, and this is different than the dynamic of the other word, which we use, is fixation. Fixation is not so much to just remain fixated on something like the name might suggest, but instead this would mean that an individual progresses chronologically in age and yet does not progress accordingly in the stages of psychosexual development. So they might go from, say, they're 7 years old in the phallic 3 to 7 stage, but when they turn 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they should be in that latency stage, but if they have a fixation on the phallic stage, this would mean even at 12, they're fixated on that developmental point. So fixation and regression. Regression is going backwards. Fixation is staying on a particular spot. This brings us to another important theorist to know as you study human growth and development is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've probably seen this in different study materials, or perhaps even if you recall in school, as depicted by a triangle or a pyramid rather. At the bottom of the pyramid are more foundational needs, and then as you progress up are more existential sort of individual and self-actualizing needs. So it starts at the bottom as the physiological needs. These are things like food and water. The next needs above that are safety needs. You think of someone's need for shelter, need for security. Love and belonging is above that, so the third layer up. And this is someone's need for community. This is someone's need to be in relationship with other people. Above that is their esteem needs. This is their identity. This is their self-concept. And then lastly, this top portion, the tip of the pyramid, the very pinnacle, is what Maslow referred to as self-actualization. This is the person's understanding of their efficacy, their purpose, their own sense of meaning, and that they contribute to the overall system in which they operate. So you sort of see these needs. And as it relates to counseling, you may see questions regarding this. If a client comes in and a question might present clients struggling with specific pathology, so as to say they're experiencing stress because of houselessness, or they're experiencing stress because of this other environmental factor happening. What stage or what need is not being met according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so that you would be able to say, oh, it sounds like their physiological need isn't happening, or their safety needs aren't being met. And that's how you might distinguish some questions related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The last thing we're going to look at in this second video on human growth and development is James Fowler's faith and spiritual development. He himself has 7 stages. They're actually listed 0 through 6, but there's 7 total if you count the 0. I'm going to list those off. The 0, which he does because the 0 is almost a non-stage. It's the first 4 years of someone's life when they don't have a spiritual concept. They're really undifferentiated, is actually the term he uses. Undifferentiated from other concepts. Someone develops or can develop some faith and sense of spirituality as early as about 2. Fowler suggests between 2 and 7. They have this intuitive, sort of projective faith. They go from that to what he calls this mythic, sort of literal faith. This is just early childhood. The next stage is a synthetic, conventional, which is primarily in adolescence. Individual reflective, where if you notice, these themes are going for more concrete, more literal, to more conventional concepts, to now being more reflective in nature. This is that young adult stage. The sort of mid-30s, where Fowler would put this 5th, or if you're counting the 0, 6th stage, would be the conjunctive faith stage, about mid-30s. And the stage that Fowler suggests not everyone gets to chronologically is about midlife, although the stages of faith development don't necessarily always correspond with this, is this universalization stage as well. So you might see, again, questions related to this and identifying if someone's of a chronological age, or if they're conceptualizing their own spirituality, what stage might they fall into based on those different times of their life. So it could say, what stage might a child be in faith and spiritual development? So you'd look at your notes and say, or you'd remember your notes rather and say, oh, they're probably in a more of a literal faith context, so because they're a child. Or if they're a young adult, they might be more reflective in their faith context. So today, in this brief video, we looked at James Fowler's faith and development. We looked at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we looked at Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic 5 stages of psychosexual development. In addition to all this, I recognize there's so much information to take in, but my hope is that through watching these videos and kind of getting the overview of this, that you're able to practice knowing the words associated with the different theorists. so that when you encounter questions, what theorist uses the word generativity in their conceptual framework, or what theorist uses the word generativity in their stage theory. You can go generativity. That's an Erik Erikson psychosocial stages of development model. That's his generativity stage. So you can go to that. Or what developmental theorist uses the phallic stage in their developmental conceptualization? You can say, oh, that's a Freud theory. You start to make references in your mind, connections in your mind between concepts and developmental theorists. Behaviorism, you'd think Pavlov and you'd think B.F. Skinner. When you think of assimilation, accommodation, you'd think Piaget. So start to practice and look at these lists so that you begin to make these mental connections, and you'll be able to study more effectively the Human Growth and Development section of the National Counselor exam. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.